Thank you for coming. In the end, it is not the years in your life that count, it is the life in your ears. I truly believe that in the end, all that we have is our memories. We all have them. We have good memories, we have bad memories. We have memories that some of us would rather forget. But it is the good and the bad combined that make us who we are. My name is Paul Sheils. I am a solo wilderness backpacker, outdoors man, bushcrafter, YouTuber. Since a very young age, I've always been fascinated by the idea of wilderness. I loved to watch the old movies about the prospectors heading into the Yukon, searching for gold, the men and the women who went through the Rocky Mountains in search of trade routes. I devoured books about the explorers who went to the North, the South Poles, and all through my life, I've always dreamt of having my own true wilderness experience. But the problem was, I had absolutely no idea how to go about organising or planning a wilderness adventure. I had no skills to speak of. I hadn't a penny in my pocket. Stone broke, still am. But over the years, I've realised, can everybody hear me properly?
Yes.
Over the years, I've realised that you don't need much money to have a wilderness adventure, or any adventure for that matter. And skills, well, skills will come with time. Time spent outdoors, hiking, hill walking, camping and such. I never had money to do a mountain skills course. Never done any hill walking course, navigation course, anything like that. I bought books. I read books. My father, who was in the audience now at the moment, told me years ago that you can travel the world by reading books. I learned the hard way through trial and error. First of all, heading up into the Wicklow Mountains, getting lost in fog, carrying a backpack that was much too heavy for me, wearing the wrong clothing, the wrong boots, everything. So much went wrong. But the thing is, it didn't stop me. I kept on going. I was never one for day hikes, and I think if I tell the truth, the reason I wasn't into day hikes, I was more into hiking over a weekend, a Friday, a Saturday, a Sunday, maybe come home the Monday. But the truth is, the only reason I started that way was because I couldn't afford a car. I couldn't drive to the mountains, do a day's hike and come back on the same day. I had to stay in the mountains. And maybe I couldn't afford a tent. So it was a sleeping bag and maybe a black bin bag wrapped around the sleeping bag to keep the rain off me. Finally, I built up a little bit of gear, tent and all this type of stuff, all these good things. And I hiked all over Ireland. I've climbed almost every single summit in Ireland. And after this, I thought, well, it's time now to do something a little bit different. So I done a little bit of research. I went to Scotland. This is Scotland here. I spent a few years hiking all around Scotland. I remember the first time I went to Scotland, I went with a brother of mine. We probably hiked about 100 kilometres. I'd go the next year, hiked 200 kilometres. The year after, 300 kilometres. All of this was I'd done on my own, all solo. One year, I went to a mountain range in Scotland called the Cairngorms. Has anyone ever heard of the Cairngorms? Yeah. The Cairngorms in Scotland is, the Scots like to say, it's their own little piece of the Arctic in Scotland. Once you go up above a certain height in these mountains in Scotland, the plants, the animals, the weather systems are all Arctic. So I spent a number of years exploring this place, and as I learned new skills, campcraft, bushcraft, I like foraging, picking wild berries, nuts. I dig up roots. I see flowers, I think they're beautiful, I take a photograph of them, and I might pluck a flower then and stick it in my mouth and I'll eat it. I know what you can eat. I can navigate without map and compass. I can navigate by the stars. I can navigate by the wind. There's so much you can do without delving into all these particular courses and the whole lot. Everything I've done was all self-taught. After Scotland, this little Arctic piece in Scotland got me thinking about the true Arctic, Lapland. I studied up about a particular place called Laponia. Laponia lies about 300 kilometres above the Arctic Circle. It is one of the largest wilderness areas in Europe. It covers an area of about 10,000 square kilometres. It is pure, pristine wilderness. And some of the areas I go hiking in do not have any trails, no tracks to follow. There are no mountain huts. People generally don't go there. There's one little particular place in Laponia. Laponia is built up of a number of national parks. One of them is called Sarek. Sarek lies in the very centre of Laponia, and it is pure, pristine wilderness, untouched. A place where bear, lynx, wolf, wolverine, moose, golden eagle, where all these animals live. On the outskirts of Sarek, you have more national parks: Rúdas, Sturgeofiat, Pagellanta, and all these places surround Sarek. The difference with these national parks is there may be some trails in them. Sarek is left pure, pristine, untouched. I like to look at it as the wilderness within the wilderness. I've travelled across Sarek National Park a number of times solo. I've been to wilderness areas in Finland. I've been along the Norwegian border. And I believe it made me a better person. In 2010, I went to Scotland and I hiked 300 kilometres across the Scottish Highlands, climbing many of the Munros that are there. People know what the Munros are. The Munros are a select group of mountains in Scotland that rise above the 3,000 foot mark. There's less than 300 of them. This is what I was doing. I was climbing these mountains. I was away for 2 weeks. I had no mobile phone coverage, no internet, no contact with anybody. A volcano erupted in Iceland called Vatnajökull. Sorry, not Vatnajökull, called Eyjafjallajökull. That's a bit of a tongue twister. And when I came home from Scotland, everybody in my hometown, in fact I think everybody in the world, was in an uproar about this volcano, Eyjafjallajökull. Some people short call it Eyja. So I knew absolutely nothing about this volcano, and when I came home I picked up a few newspapers and I began to read newspapers trying to catch up with this story. And as I was reading the story, I began to realise that Iceland is a fascinating place, and it's one of the largest wilderness areas we have in Europe. In fact, it's one of the most extreme places we have in the whole world. It's the most volcanically active place in the whole world. It has the largest desert in Europe, Jordan. It has the largest ice cap in the world, outside of the poles. It's also another place where you can hike in wilderness for days, for weeks, with no tracks and no trails. I decided I would head up to the north of Iceland, along the ring road, and hike to the south. Iceland is about 1.25 times the size of Ireland. Larger than Ireland, but there's only 320,000 people living there. And these people are scattered along the ring road. That's the red road around the country. And all the inside is pure, pristine, uninhabited. In fact, it's classed as uninhabitable wilderness. So that was my plan. The blue line was the hike from the north of the ring road to the south. A distance of about 500 kilometres. It started off in the north of Iceland in what's known as the Jordan Desert. Jordan is an Icelandic term. It can be translated as the desert of crimes. During medieval times, the Vikings, who were the first people in the world to have a parliament, by the way, when someone caused a crime, they were classed as outlaws. They were outside of the law, which also meant they weren't even protected by the law anymore. Anybody could come and chop their head off, stab them with a knife, kill them, and nothing would be done, because that person was outside of the law. They were outlaws. And they were banished onto the Jordan Desert, where they lived for a few weeks and then they died. There's nothing there. There's vast areas there where you wouldn't even see a blade of grass. Jordan Desert is a big lava field, and it is, as I say, it's a desert. It's a cold desert. The Vatnajökull ice cap is south of this desert, and as the Atlantic winds come up over Iceland and they come up over Vatnajökull glacier, the clouds are risen in elevation, and all that cargo of moisture is dropped down onto the glacier. By the time the clouds come over the Jordan, it's completely dry. There's nothing there. The Jordan is full of all this volcanic sand, and at times wind speeds can be up to 100 kilometers an hour. And there were many times where I woke up in the morning from my little tent and my face would be completely black. My nose would be full of dust. It would be in my ears and everything. It wasn't particularly nice, but sometimes you have to go through these things. When I was in Iceland, there was 24-hour daylight, and it was maybe about after a week of hiking, it began to get a little bit dark at night time. Nighttime maybe lasted about only 1 hour, but there were absolutely fabulous sunsets, something I will carry with me forever. I'll never forget them. It is a lunar landscape. People often say the north of Iceland is like a lunar landscape, and it really is, because in 1969, before the moon landings, they trained there. This is where they actually went to train. There's nobody there. It is completely isolated. Askja is a volcano in the centre of Jordan. I climbed the volcano right up onto the crater rim, and on the crater rim, I stood on the crater rim and I looked over to the far side. You can see in the photograph there's a big vast lake at the far side. It covers about 12 square kilometres. It looks like a range of mountains in the back. That's actually the far side of the crater rim. About 2 or 3 days before I stood on this side of the crater rim, the far side collapsed, sending about 50 to 60 million cubic metres of material down into the lake, which created a tsunami with waves of about 200 feet high. When I stood there taking this photograph, I knew absolutely nothing about it until I came home and started studying up about Askia. This is the trickle of water coming towards me. About 2 minutes after this photograph was taken, the water was up to my knees. And I could see the water about 2 kilometres distant. That's what I had to hike through. Here we go.
That's the water.
It looks like I'm smiling in the photograph, but believe me, I'm not. I hiked further south. I skirted along the Vatnajökull ice cap. The silence was absolutely deafening. I think 4 or 5 days I didn't see any life whatsoever, not a blade of grass, not an insect. One particular day, a little snow bunting, a little unassuming bird of the Arctic, landed right down at my feet and looked up at me and started chirping. It was one of the most fascinating experiences I've ever had in the wilderness. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're out there on your own, you see things in a different light. This is crossing the ice cap. This is one particular day where I made a navigational error. I thought I was skirting along the Vatnajökull ice cap. I realised I was actually 2 kilometres up on top of the ice cap with no glacial experience. The Spring of Sandur, empty wastelands where ghosts wander. South of the Vatnajökull ice cap there's also a desert where in medieval times the Icelanders were absolutely terrified of. Even back then, people didn't cross this desert. They believed it was a place where ghosts wander. This is another volcanic mountain range down near the south of Iceland. This particular place actually has a trail through it where hikers go, and they can spend 4 days crossing these mountains. I actually done it in 3. It is not particularly my style of hiking. I do not like to follow trails and tracks and stay in huts, but as you can see, the landscape is absolutely fascinating. This is the Logofgor Trail. This is, as I was hiking along this trail, I had to, of course, hike across snow, and there was one particular day I was hiking across the snow, and one of my trekking poles went down into the snow, and it just went straight down into the snow. And I noticed that there's something hollow underneath me, so I went to investigate, and if I had fell through, this is where I would have landed. There's a stream running through the snow. It was about boiling point. There was lots of hot streams, geysers. If I was to say one thing about what I do, I would say that I truly believe that in the end, all we have is our memories. And I would urge you to build up as many memories as you can through your life. Try and build up as many good memories as you can. And don't let anything stop you doing that. Because, as I said earlier on, that's what makes us who we are. I am just a completely ordinary person who started off hill walking in Ireland. I just kept doing it. My friends don't do it. They're into football and other things that I myself aren't into. I didn't let it stop me. I went up into the Wicklow Mountains, the Connemara Mountains, the McGillicuddy Reeks, went to Scotland, went to Lapland, went to Iceland, into deep wilderness areas where nobody goes. I am just like you, sir, like you, and like you. That's the big happy face when I finished my trek in Iceland. The secret chest in Tracy's lair under the Skoga waterfall, and I'll finish up here. This is the waterfall where I finished in a little village called Skoga, and when I arrived there, there was a little poem I read. It was on a little plaque underneath the waterfall, and I hope I can remember it. It said something like, the secret chest in Tracy's lair under the Skoga waterfall. And it went on, it said something like, there's treasure buried underneath the waterfall, and basically the little poem was telling me that if you arrive at this waterfall, and if you go into the waterfall, you would find treasure. But I had to disagree with the little poem because I arrived at the waterfall and I didn't find any treasure. I still don't have 2 pennies to rub together. And I realised it wasn't on reaching the waterfall where the treasure was. I realised I actually did. I found the treasure. The treasure, I had to hike 500 kilometres to find the treasure. That's where the treasure is. The treasure is in the journey. It mightn't just be the actual 500 kilometres going across Iceland. It's the journey of life. Think about that for a minute. Thank you very much.